biodiversity conservation is mainly about protecting life on Earth so that we can continue to support human well-being and our development. It also involves how we can survive by preserving different species. Maybe I'll start with a question. I know across the developed world, when I mean developed world, I mean most of Europe and Asia, biodiversity is big. But around here, we are not conscious of if this species or this animal or this plant is going extinct. So the question I would like to ask is biodiversity a luxury or a necessity? Growing up, you probably would have heard our parents say, oh, there used to be this animal, there used to be this plant that used to be around this village, but it's no longer, I don't see it anymore. The number of rats we have in Benue, I'm not sure we have that number anymore. Is that really a concern? Is biodiversity a luxury or is it a necessity? That's one question I would like to ask. Can development happen without conservation? If we need to fell trees, if we need to take out forests to build industries, for example, if we really need to make changes, can we do that without and forgetting about conservation? So I would need some responses from the class. If you can give me your answer. Someone has said biodiversity is necessity, not a luxury. Can you explain why you think is? Because the argument can be from around here. What we need now is food, shelter. If we can just make things work, must we necessarily follow the white man in all of this? Any responses? Yes, I haven't seen any responses. Okay, I can't see any hands. The reality is that when it comes to development and development without conservation, you are going to have short-term development. You can see progress, but in the long term, when you start having the effects that the loss of these plants, animals have on society, you would realize that it is a necessity and not a luxury. And it is really important that as scientists, we enlighten the world. It's the variety of life at all levels that makes the world interesting. And so we need to have that understanding going forward. We can look at biodiversity across three different levels, and all these levels have interconnections with each other. If one level is affected, the next level is also affected. So we need to have that understanding. There is a species diversity that is at one level. all specimens on Earth belong to one particular species. You have single-cell organisms at the lowest level, then fungi are multi-celled. We have plants, and then we go into animals at the higher level of species. There's also genetic diversity, and those are like genetic variations within a species. A horse and a donkey, they're within one species, but there is genetic diversity within them. And this is both within and between populations as well. And there is what we call the ecosystem diversity. That is where different biological communities and the associations with the chemical and physical environments coexist. And all these levels of diversity are necessary for the continued survival of life as we know it, and are important to people. For species diversity, it fills the entire world with a different range of environments. It's important to people for the resources provided, plants and animals for food, shelter, and medicine. Genetic diversity, it maintains reproductive vitality. When you have species that share the same genes, they are more likely to produce healthier offsprings. The gene combinations are helping in reducing diseases, or in terms of disease resistance. And if you can have different varieties of crops. Some will be more disease resistant. Some would adapt to a different environment. You have different varieties of rice. Some grow in some particular environment or soil, and some others grow in a different place. So that diversity helps us to withstand lots of things that would affect the continued existence of that species. So it's important to people with such as this resistance. In an ecosystem, a diversity constitutes an ecosystem, so required to maintain proper ecosystem functioning. How are these species defined? Morphological definition. A group of individuals has physiological or biochemical distinctions from other groups in some important aspects. If we look at the human race, we are significantly different from the chimpanzees, the baboons, and all of that in terms of our physiology, in terms of there are a few biochemical processes that are different. For biological definition, it's a group of individuals who breed among themselves in the wild, but do not breed with other groups. These two approaches sometimes don't give the same results. The morphological approach is more favored by taxonomists and biologists. The biological approach can be difficult to use because it requires knowledge of breeding habits, including breeding potentials. We see this especially in co-breeding around dogs. Having a look and trying some particular dogs will breed, will be able to breed, but some others it won't work. So those are just definitions. Okay, this is a single species dog. Dogs may have a number of varieties: Alsatians, Great Danes, Beagles, Chihuahua, and these have observable morphological differences. But many of them can readily interbreed. Some sibling species, very closely related morphologically, are biologically distinct. They will not interbreed. So if you look at these two toads, they look alike, but they do not interbreed. So it's essential that we have this understanding if we are to preserve different species across the world. I was watching a TV show a couple of weeks ago about the Colombian Colombian drug warlord, Escobar. And after he was killed, full of crocodiles, and is believed
Sir, we can't hear you, sir. Hello, sir. We can't hear you. The audio is bad. And we really want to know about this Escobar. Hello, sir. The Escobar story is very interesting, and the network is not allowing us here in the story. I think the network kicked Prof out. Okay, Prof is back now. Prof, we can't hear you very well, sir.
Okay.
Yes, you were on the Escobar story, sir.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So after he was killed, a lot of his properties were auctioned, destroyed, and all of that. But the crocodiles he kept in his house. The world realized that there were a distinct special, and international agencies came together, and up till today, the crocodiles are there. At some point, they were breeding far faster than what the ecosystem could take them to reduce their breeding. But that's how much in other parts of the world they take conservation. And so the hope for this class is that we become more interested in species around us, protecting the environment. That's why the World Bank is very interested in environmental and impact assessments on any development projects. If you are constructing a road, if you're building, you do an EIA or an ESIA, environmental and social impact environmental and social impact assessment, and see what effects do we think this development that is meant to improve the livelihood of people would have on biodiversity, and look for ways you can protect if you are constructing or building and you realize that that road will pass through maybe an area where some microorganisms that might go extinct, you would look for a way to avoid it or see how you can possibly relocate so you can have those species. The reality is, as science moves on, the nature takes care of itself. Takes care of its own. So that species you think is not important might be the savior tomorrow. Animals, you think, oh, let me just kill it for food because you just have to eat today. You could have them in your community and they could contribute to the ecosystem. They could be a tourist attraction. We haven't taken tourism seriously in Nigeria, especially because many other countries within Africa are making lots of money. I think I was doing a calculation or a small research recently, and I think Egypt in last year made, I think, $34 billion from tourism alone, just preserving artifacts of years ago. How many of those things do we have in Nigeria that are preserved today when it even comes to cultural artifacts? So it's still the same thing with species. At present, only 15% of the world species have been fully classified, and species are going extinct faster than the rate of classification. So individuals within a population, few to millions, are genetically different from one another in terms of genetic diversity, leading to differences in physiology. This variation occurs when offspring receiving sexual reproduction. As its genotype, it's unique. The phenotype is the physical and biochemical characteristics resulting from the genotype in interactions with its environment. And the total array of genes in the population is known as the gene pool. So gene coding for characteristics allows survival and reproduction in challenging environments more likely to survive, resulting in increasing proportions of the population sharing these winning characteristics. And this is what is known as natural selection. And so you see mosquitoes breed, we use insecticides or we use antibiotics to deal with them, and after a while you see those genes recombine and they are able to survive. But and that is natural selection, the generation after that becomes stronger, it withstands whatever challenges it's facing in its environments. Rare species or smaller populations have less genetic variation than more widespread species. These haven't adapted to the environment like the initial ones that were naturally selected. Different genes frequencies between populations are an important aspect of biodiversity. So conservationists recommend this protection, especially for small, isolated populations with quite unique gene distributions. These subpopulations are sometimes designated varieties or subspecies. Most mating will occur between populations, but occasionally individuals will cross over. So animals basically, they mate amongst their own populations, but there might be individual crossover between different species. Transferring genetic combination into the receiving population, which is a gene flow, this can sometimes be interrupted by human activity. There are lots of diversity that are affected by human intervention. Genetic variation also occurs within domestic plants and animals. Humans will preserve a new plant and animal form resulting from recombination where they better suit their needs. As farmers, if you've observed people in the village, they know the species that are resistant to diseases. They know this, so they decide at this point, okay, let me select these ones that can withstand drought. If you plant rice or soya beans, maybe you find out after a few weeks of no rainfall, those particular species are not doing well. You now decide, okay, let me look at the species that will do well. And it's the process called artificial selection. It's not natural anymore. By this means, varieties of plants can be selected that are higher yielding, reliable, and adapted to local conditions. And that's why crops like maybe apple will not grow well in Nigeria. But of recent, we're beginning to have things like strawberry growing just by artificial selection, brought in several. Most of them died, but the ones that survived, they are able to cope with that environment through the artificial selection. And this is by the human being now deciding this is what I will do. Human activity can also cause inadvertent artificial selection in wild species. I've mentioned pesticide resistance in wild pests and drug resistance in disease-causing bacterials. So you introduce something to a microorganism, and then there's some reselection or recombination of genes, and that species now withstands whatever the environment is throwing at it. There's also ecosystem diversity, and it has to do with species in an area, their interactions with each other, and with the physical environment. So the ecosystem even inside Benue is different from one local government or one location to the other. So the characteristics of an ecosystem are basically impacted by 5 different things: the physical environment, the processes, the biological community, human action, and episodic extreme environmental conditions. These are the factors that create that ecosystem diversity. So if you have in a particular community where maybe a particular animal is hunted, and that animal normally eats a prey, it affects that ecosystem by the processes that happen there. If you have a community that maybe has a religious belief about certain practices, that particular ecosystem is now impacted because of that practice. So these 5 different things are the main characteristics of an ecosystem diversity. These factors basically characterize an ecosystem: the physical environment, like we say, physical characteristics of the land, rock type, altitude, slope. There are some animals that will grow right at high altitude. Some will not be able to grow at high altitude. The type of rock you have, the climate, the weather, the land cover. Is it forest? Is it grassland? It determines the microbes that you would find in that community. Processes, water recycling, evapotranspiration, airborne vapor, precipitation from rainfall, energy capture, mineral nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus. They are all different cycles between living and non-living things. So these are all the things that characterize an ecosystem. The biological community, like we said, different soil types carries different microbes, and they have activities that they activate in those environments, and so you would have different things happening in that biological environment. Different plants have different growing requirements, soil types, light levels, water abundance, and pollination method. Different animals eat different things and need different types of resting and nesting places. I mentioned in the earlier class how we were growing microorganism as a protein. And one of the things we did in the lab, we isolated a microorganism called Metallophilus metallotrophus. It's a bacteria that grows on methane gas. Typically, if you introduce methane gas, most microorganisms will die. But this particular microorganism, from evolution, has been able to adapt to methane, and it actually metabolizes methane and produces proteins really, really fast. So in 14 minutes, you are having a doubling rate. What we did in the lab was we next thing again, try it, and then we're able to combine all of it and say, okay, these are the optimal conditions of this microorganism. And then we test the proteins that it has produced, and we get a combination of all the proteins that an animal needs. And in those experiments, you find out sometimes we have an anomaly and it becomes a result. And so that biological community has different growing requirements. That is now in the lab. In the soil, it has the same different interactions, either biochemical, physical, and all of that. Species with a wide variety of food will develop a large and widely distributed population. Species with very confined and limited food source will not build a large population and be vulnerable to extinction. So any species that is able to take on any kind of food will grow, but the one that has limitations won't grow. There's also interactions between species. There's competition. They eat the same food, require the same nesting sites. There's predatory interactions where one is a predator, and then there's mutualistic. They enhance each other's survival. Plants feed birds who distribute seeds. So basically, they are working and enabling each other's survival. And there's symbiotic. Species cannot survive within each other. Algae living in coral. If either species dies, the other one dies as well. These are things we learned in our biology classes. Human action can also cause significant change at any of those above levels. We might drain a wetland, clear a topsoil, cut down forests, overgraze grassland. And as we're doing these things, it affects maybe microbes, those microbes that are meant to enhance the soil. And by that, those plants are affected, and the plants that are able to grow. You spray to control insects. What is the effect of that insect on other things? We hunt wildlife to extinction because of maybe trying to solve a disease problem will cause other issues. So those sort of interactions should be understood. Species that can adapt to human action will survive. You can eat human crops in place of wild plant species or birds that can nest in man-made structures. So particular birds might not be able to do that, and those ones might have an issue with they might have issue with surviving. Extreme weather conditions, winds, temperatures, droughts, they kill species that cannot withstand these harsh conditions. You can imagine in a place like Alberta, temperatures drop to minus 40 in the winter. And then at that point, you don't see any ants or most insects are not able to withstand it. But by the time the summer is back, many of those insects are back. And so they have developed genes to be able to withstand such conditions. And I mean, at the end of the day, species that are not able to withstand it, they die from those harsh conditions. So, and loss of species may be permanent or temporary, depends on whether remnants survive or recolonize from other areas. Threats to biodiversity, that's the vulnerability to extinction. Most vulnerable species, they exist at only few sites within a narrow geographical range, small oceanic islands, fish in single lake, watershed. They are vulnerable to major change in environment, human action, volcanoes, floods. Those are the ones that cannot take adverse change in conditions. They exist as one of a few populations. They can be wiped out by chance factors, earthquakes, floods, fire, disease, human action. They have a small population size as large predators and extreme specialists. Lack of genetic variability means less adaptability to changing environment. And in extreme cases, species have been declined to a few individuals. So across the entire world, those species are just really few. Where population size is declining, where you have a situation where population size is declining year by year, you still see this trend continue. So if it continues like that without an intervention, it's most likely to go extinct unless the cause of the decline is identified and changed. What are the reasons why this is happening? Is it poaching? Is it farm practices? Those have to be identified and changed. Is hunted or harvested by people? If the species is useful to man, they'll be harvested or hunted. They can readily lead to extinction unless regulated. Imagine in communities where hunting is a major way of living or a way of life. It's going to be very difficult, especially in a place like Africa, if you tell them, no, this thing will affect this hunting this animal will affect the environment. We need that species in the environment. If there are no laws, if we don't find a way, advocacy to convince these people and let them know what is happening, that they should care about the next generation, you would have this as a threat to biodiversity. There are minor factors. Species are grouped together in specific areas, herds of bison, bats in caves. Hunters can harvest a whole population quickly. Species that meet any of these criteria highlight targets for conservation. The more of the criteria they meet, the greater the priority for conservation. So if we look at species that are declining, that they are hunted, that have a particular place where they stay, we need to be able to look at those ones and make them a priority for conservation. The whole idea is we want to conserve as many species in the world as possible, and it's everybody's responsibility. The key to conservation is knowing what a species is vulnerable to. If problem is not well understood, it becomes a challenge. If the particular species needs some things to survive and we don't know, then we're not able to deal with conservation. There's an International Union of Conservation of Nature red list, and it has information about range, population size, habitat and ecology, use, and of trade, threats, and conservation actions. And these are powerful tools informing necessary conservation decisions. This is from the International Union of Conservation of Nature. It is used by governments and NGOs at all levels. International standard method of classification, and this becomes a standard way of classifying a microorganism or a species that you think is vulnerable to extinction. So this should go beyond these lectures, and that's why this course is quite practical. As we move around in our environment, when we see an insect, we should be thinking of how to identify it, how much of it is there, what do we need to know about it, so that we are practical in terms of our outlook to life. And that shows you care about the environment, you care about your community, you care about leaving something for your children unborn. And that's what environmental sustainability is about. It's possible to track the classification status of species over time and evaluate the efficacy of conservation efforts. And that's what is called monitoring now, and evaluating what you know about that particular species. So there are different categories here. They are not evaluated. So there are species that have not been evaluated yet. Data is deficient. You don't have adequate information determine their risks of extinction. Least concern. You don't consider that it is near threatened at this point. Near threatened is the next category. It's close to qualifying for threatened category. Vulnerable. In that case, you have high extinction risk in wild based on the criteria on the right-hand side here, where you have observable reduction. A is observable reduction in number of individuals. So you are monitoring maybe month by month, year by year, how they are reducing in numbers. B, total geographical area occupied by species. C, predicted decline in number of individuals. D, number of mature individuals currently alive. E, probability the species will go extinct within a certain amount, a number of years or generations. You have endangered, you have critically endangered, you have extinct in the wild, and there's extinct which is no longer known to exist anywhere. So these are the different levels of categories and this description on the red list. Conservation done. Hello? Am I being heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So about conservation done. There are some general principles. The primary goal of conservation is to protect and manage biodiversity to obtain resources for sustainable development. Three main objectives: preserve diversity of species, sustainable utilization of species and ecosystem, and to maintain life supporting systems and essential ecological processes. So first of all, you have to identify the different species and say, okay, have I identified them? How do I use them? If there are species that are going to be hunted, what are the rules we have for hunting? If you use them for particular ecosystems, how do you use them so that they are still sustained? So, and that leads us to the third one, to maintain life supporting systems and essential ecological processes. The ideal strategy is the preservation of natural communities in the wild. That is called in situ. There's ex situ, because ecosystem level interaction among species is often crucial to rare species survival. Of course, this cannot often be replicated artificially. And so where that natural community is for that particular species, you try to create that or preserve that natural community. What are the factors that are there that needs this species to live? You preserve that natural community. Of course, that is not possible in many places. If you have maybe a development in that area, you might need to look for how you would still preserve that community. Captivity breeding usually does not have a large enough population. So, for example, you can choose to breed them in a small area, for example, what you have in zoos, how many lions can you have in a zoo? And how many would you have in a natural ecosystem like the safaris and the natural park, the national parks, or the nature parks? You have a limitation if you want to breed them in captivity. So what are the basic approaches to diversity conservation? There are three conservation strategies. As you can see here, we have both ex situ conservation and in situ conservation. For ex situ, we have you can choose to store their sperms and their eggs, or you can also choose to keep their seeds for plants. You can choose to have them in the zoos or an aquarium or a botanical garden for plants. I'm going to share a few pictures of a botanical garden we were at in, I think, Mauritius. And it's one of the most beautiful. You would see all kinds of flowers. You will see dogs and all of that. And that's a massive tourism. You could see the numbers of people flying from all over the world to have a look at beautiful flowers you have not seen in other parts of the world. I can't recall when now. That was recent. In Greece, in Athens, something from over 200 years ago, they had a queen which was most beloved, and she kept lots of these varieties of plants. Some animals that are no longer there again, that were relocated, were gifts from other kingdoms. And these have been preserved for well over 100 years. And so you see communities or countries making sacrifices, planning way ahead to protect. Where are we? These are the kind of things I would share some of these pictures, and you will see the beauty of preservation or conservation as it is. For in situ conservation, we are talking protection, management. We just talked about how you keep that particular community in its natural state, and then you manage the population, you monitor, and then from all of this, you establish breeding programs that fits into viable wild population. To establish new populations, there are two goals. You establish a new wild and semi-wild population, and you increase the size of the existing populations. And this can be used where species are persisted only in a captivity or small isolated wild populations. Places like Dubai or Malaysia has one of the biggest underground aquarium you could ever see, and there are sharks and there are several species there, and they are doing their bits in terms of biodiversity conservation. In terms of benefits, it increases geographical spread. Widely dispersed populations are less vulnerable to natural calamities. So typically, if you have a wildfire, it won't affect species that are sort of caged, and it decreases the risks of extinction through increasing numbers. The prerequisite for successful programs is to understand factors causing extinction pressure and eliminate or control these. There is also a reintroduction program that's creating a new population in its original environment. Typically, individuals placed as near as possible to site where their ancestors are collected. They are more likely to adapt to local conditions. And so if, for example, you are building across, there's a development across a particular community, and you realize that maybe close to that community, that natural environment or ecosystem is there, you reintroduce the microorganisms or species or whatever you are looking at and create something similar close to where their ancestors were collected. There's also a restocking program. You release individuals captive, bred, or captured elsewhere into an existing population to increase the size of its gene pool. There's also introduction program, and that is moving captive or captured individuals into ecologically suitable ranges outside historical range. So you could move it from one particular region to another. We've talked generally on plants and animals and all of that. So let's be specific to animals. Animals have their specific issues, expensive long-term commitment, especially where animals breed slowly and long-lived. A tortoise, for example, you need to breed a particular tortoise. It's going to take you a while. Programs can be highly emotional public issues, especially where animals are destructive to agriculture or dangerous. If many years ago you used to have lions in some forest around, of course, it will be opposed because they are destructive, they are dangerous, so you might need to look for the issues that are specific to that animal. They are opposed by local people on grounds of government interference, especially where constraints are imposed. I give an example of if you have a hunting community and you're telling that community not to hunt a particular species again, you would have issues with those sort of resistance. And so there's a need to involve stakeholders, advocacy, explain the need, what are the goals, ask for support, and then offer incentives. If you identify an animal and all of that, I'm going to pay you equivalent of what you would have gotten. And so that community is motivated to also preserve that animal. Some animals are small in captivity populations and may have lost most genetic variability. So they have low adaptability, of course. Careful selection may be necessary, including selecting individuals closely related, adapted to the release site. Soft release may be needed, feeding, sheltering, introducing gradually until used to sound, sight, smells, and layout of area. Hard release may result in explosive dispersal, leading to failure of establishments. The way the rats in the house behave is different from the way the rat in the bush behaves. So you need to have those different understandings of whatever species you are trying to conserve. Post-release intervention may be necessary if survival is in peril. Destructive events or activities need to be controlled. Pests, droughts, food shortage, humans, and decision on whether it is better to intervene or let animals survive on their own. Rules for success from the world of game animal breeding. Success is likely to be greater the more ideal the habitat. That is, how high quality the habitat is at the core compared to the periphery of the range. For wild caught over active bred animals, for herbivores over carnivores. Of course, it's easier to get plants to feed a herbivore than to get animals to feed a carnivore. Many years ago, I had someone who was close to me and was commissioner for animal and forestry in Benue State, and they went to Kenya and got some lions for the Makurdi Zoo. And it was difficult to keep those lions because you needed to be feeding them goats. The workers who are working in the zoo have not finished eating goats. They are now giving a lion goats. But if you say feed them herbs for an animal, it's easier. So success is likely to be greater if you are dealing with herbs. I'm just using that as an example. The more individuals released, the more your chances of success is higher. It also is likely to be greater if animals require learned behavior to survive. So as the animal understands that I need to adapt to survive, and they are trained, it makes it easier for success. These are case studies. I won't talk about them now, but when you share them, you can have a look at how wild dogs were reintroduced to a national park in Mozambique in 2018. It's really sad when you don't see these examples in our country, and you see it in smaller countries that have taken this thing to another level, and you see people traveling from all over the world to experience nature. And yet we have all that it takes to be able to do that. And we are not taking that seriously. For plants, establishment methods differ fundamentally from those of animals. Animals move within new ranges to find more suitable sites. Plants are planted, seeds or plants cannot, so they are stationary. Therefore, the selection of the microsite has to be very careful to ensure ideal conditions, amount of sunshine, soil type, water levels. Plants and seed either collected from the wild or bred in protected environments. There are two approaches. You either scatter them widely or you plant out propagated plants. And then you transfer from other sites appropriate where the plants are threatened in some ways. There's a large healthy population where removal of a small percentage is not vastly affects their sustainability. In terms of rules, we select plants from sites as similar as the target site as possible, ensure genetic compatibility with target site conditions, eliminate stroke, control factors that cause historic extinction. So you would have identified what conditions that plant was not comfortable with and introduce and control those factors and eliminate those factors for them to thrive. Success rates of establishing of scattering seeds is very low. When you spread, it's in planting for this thing. When you spread seeds, they might compete for nutrients in the soil. So it's usually better if you plant seeds in a better way by not scattering them. Chances are improved by off-site propagation. These plants also produce a seed a year earlier than seed planted plants. Examples can be even in greenhouses where you provide not just rainfall, but exact amount of water, nutrient to it, and you're able to breed. Carry out necessary site protection. The important thing here is mimic natural disturbance that plants require, tree felling and control threads, removal of competitor plants, plant other species. Ex situ conservation. Due to increasing destruction of disturbance of ecosystems, even species under management in situ may decline and go extinct. So ex situ conservation is also needed. And that's where you either put them in, not in the ex situ means not in that environment, but in a different artificial environment like a zoo, or in some cases, for technology, you're able to preserve their sperm and even their eggs. I mean, even the human race is doing that now through IVF and all of that. You have a sperm bank. You're going to have the advanced world keep sperms and ovaries of very smart people to breed a population. It's even going into humans at the moment. Two circumstances when useful. Historic ranges are gone or badly degraded. So you breed a population to reestablish the wild if conditions allow. Range available for wild populations are small. So the best option is to rapidly augment source population at a lower cost. Research can now be carried out on that captive species. Examples of species already extinct in the world. These are birds you can never see again because they are extinct. And it's Socorro Island drove dove. This is a dove on Socorro Island, driven to extinction by introduction of cats to the island. So the cats hunted and they are no longer even in existence. There's a Belorubitsa, that's the fish. It's native to the Caspian Sea, doomed by a dam cutting off access to the Volga River to spawn. And then the pygmy Rwandan water lily. It was made extinct when an overflowing freshwater hot spring was diverted for agriculture. So these are things you see, and it's really sad. So for the animals, you can have them in zoo and wildlife park, in game farms and private breeders. For marine species, you can have them in aquarium or aquaria, and then for plants, you can have them in botanical gardens and seed banks. Zoos. We have over 10,000 zoos worldwide with 700 to 800 million visitors annually. Not even sure we have 1 million of visitors to zoos in Nigeria. And it's sad because even in the 80s, Children's Day visits were in zoos. How many of those zoos can we see? I think Jos has done really well. The Jos Zoo is still active. The Jos Wildlife Park, you still have a wide range of animals, but they are not as much as we should be having. We should be growing. When you have maybe a panda being imported from maybe a country like Japan to be bred in the West, if you know the number of people that travel from across the country to see this new animal, it improves revenue. I'm not sure if few of us in our different states, when we look at budgets of a state, as environmental specialists, we should start looking out for what our governments at different levels are doing to preserve this. And we should be able to say, oh, this shows that we're thinking about the future. A traditional focus displaying large vertebrates in cages and pens. This is for public primary interest. More recently, incorporating displays with information about ecology and threats to this species. Carry out research programs to complement conservation efforts worldwide. And it's ideal for a captive breeding programs as staff have relevant experience. It also helps in developing facility and technology to establish breeding colonies for reintroducing these rare species into the wild. So you breed them for a while there, and then you identify which wild community it can grow, and they are able to transfer or reintroduce them into the wild at some point. What are the challenges with the process of using a zoo? Most captive animals bred at such a high rate, so it will overwhelm that facility. I just mentioned the crocodile, the crocodile issue, because that's their natural, they are being taken care of with all the right conditions. So when they grow, they overwhelm that facility. Some rare species do not adapt well to captivity, so they struggle to breed because that's not their natural habitats. And so it will be important to use adaptive techniques, use contraceptives with fast breeding animals, giving pets. Those are all technologies. Incubating an early rearing of individuals to protect them from threats, and then use of artificial intelligence. When isolated female, what they call this again, artificial insemination. When isolated females come into breeding condition. This is useful for maintaining genetic diversity, as females may be inseminated with sperm from distantly related males. I think we've seen a lot of that with piggery and several other animals. Sexing semen to maintain sex ratios. That's you select the semen and look at, okay, this I want more female and I want more males. Embryo transfer. This includes test tube fertilization placed into surrogate mothers. That's typically like an IVF, and then global computerized database, and identify mates to prevent inbreeding problems. For plants, botanical gardens, typically it's the wealthy that do this sort of things in terms of having botanical gardens. I mentioned the Queen in Greece. It's called the Queen's Park. And initially, that was what it was for. Important. These are a lot of cities across the world have very wealthy people, botanical gardens, and that becomes their legacy. They are leaving to the world, and botanical gardens named after very wealthy people who have established it with lots of funds. There are reported to be 1,800 botanical gardens in the world across 150 countries. Over 500 million visits to botanical gardens globally. That is, annually, you have 500 million people visiting botanic gardens. They are mainly located in Nigeria. In temperate countries, 550 in Europe. There are 2 in Nigeria. Cyrus Palmettum and Botanic Garden, and then Kanu Botanic Garden. They cultivate 105,634 species, and about greater than 41% of known threatened species. So you can see the effect that these gardens, these botanical gardens are having in terms of conserving 41% of known threatened species. Imagine if Africa and other tropical countries also go into this way, have more chances of having to conserve these species. The world's largest botanical garden is the Royal Botanical Garden that is owned by the royal family at Kew, London. It has 16,900 plus unique plant species, rare and endangered species. Some particular botanic gardens can decide to specialize in particular types of plants. Plants are easier to cultivate in controlled environment than animals. Like I said, you can have greenhouses, you can create all the enabling environment for that plant if you know what they are, and then grow them. And once they're established, they can be kept alive for decades and centuries. Population can be established from seeds, from shrubs, can be grown in glass houses or gardens. It can be grown in high density and prone to small size if needed. Self-pollinators maintain their own level of genetic variation. And most plants produce seeds that can be easily collected and germinated, generally stored for long periods or as backups for living collections. Good sources of information on rare and endangered species and their cultivation in botanical gardens, because the staff are trained and they are recognized authorities on species, have been specialists and experts in that area. And they can lead expeditions to discover new species and determine the distribution and status of species in the wild. If you need that. And worldwide coordination of botanical gardens, other botanical garden conservation international for conservation purposes. And what this happens is you have support from these groups to be able to do what you are meant to do. Limitations, there are not enough botanical gardens in the tropics, like I said, where most plant diversity actually exists. So it is we in Africa that, and the other tropical parts of the world that actually need this. And you can see the next sentence or next line. None has been established in the last 15 years. And that tells you what we think about conservation as a priority. I just hope that we're able to raise children who are more concerned about the environment. What are the limitations of ex-situ conservation? Cost. It is more expensive than conservation programs, especially for large animals, but cost can be offset by paying visitors, tourism. population science to maintain genetic diversity, captive populations of several hundred to several thousands are needed. No zoo can do this. So collaborations between zoos are necessary. I know maybe 6 months in a particular zoo, and then they move them to another zoo to be able to deal with maybe the cost, or even in terms of population size, they manage it. And then you can hear an announcement that, oh, you have less than 1 year for this particular animal. They take their birthday seriously. It's strange that we have lost a lot of this. In the 80s, there used to be a gorilla or a chimpanzee, I can't remember, in Jaws called Peter Zoo. And he had an academic gown on some days. And these were very wonderful stories for us as kids, but now we have lost interest in those kind of things. And it starts from now. Even if you can't have that effect on society, you can have it on your children. Let them grow with that mindset of preservation. Volunteer in environment clubs and all of that. Adaptation. Captive populations may undergo genetic adaptation to artificial environments. Animals with population to flight, a benefit to the wild, may not thrive in captivity. Learning skills. These are all the limitations we have to ex situ conservation. Animals become ignorant of their natural environment. They can't survive in the wild. If you need to transfer them, it becomes difficult because they haven't learned that. And you need to now look for ways in which you can still make them survive in the wild. Ex situ conservation methods are particularly vulnerable to breakdown of support, e.g. funding, electricity, where you have issues of funding, especially in Nigeria. We really haven't taken care of major things we think are important. So why am I sending money to a zoo to take care of an animal? Some species breed too easily, so there can be a surplus of animals. So more animals than ex situ activity can support. And I mean, there are ethical issues over, can I kill? Can I destroy? It might not be right. Ex situ solutions often needed when it is impossible to preserve species in the wild. So site conservation approach, situ conservation approaches. I think we have gone past our time. Perhaps we can continue tomorrow with this, finish with this, and then start the next set of lectures. Is that okay?
Okay, sir.
Or do we continue?
No, sir. We'll continue tomorrow, sir.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay.
I think it's time. We'll continue tomorrow.
Yeah,
Continue tomorrow.
Let's continue tomorrow.
Okay, that's fine. I will send the material. Thank you.
If I say HND, we have
Thanks for the lecture, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Interesting, though.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
You said? No, that's at the end of
Thank you very much.
the